Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Ravaged. This is not a game that I haven't shown off before. In fact, I have shown you a couple of videos of this game. However, both of them have been with the developers, and I love being able to do that because it gives you guys a really unique perspective on the title. It allows the devs to really explain exactly what's going on with the game, which is awesome. You know, that's a really good opportunity. However, the downside to that is that it doesn't really leave an awful lot of room to apply some constructive criticism to the game unless they directly ask for it. It's an interview format, which makes the whole thing just a little bit awkward. So what I like to do is these... How have I not hit him yet? God, I'm a terrible sniper. It's nice to be able to just get the straight-up WTF Is going for these games, because then I can give you my honest opinion on it. So, Ravaged is a post-apocalyptic competitive multiplayer shooter in the vein of Battlefield, and more importantly, Frontline's Field of War and Homefront, because a lot of the Two Dawn guys were responsible for those games. Now, that's not exactly a glowing record, honestly. I criticized both of those games. Admittedly, I criticized the single-player more than I did the multiplayer, but at the end of the day, it's still something you need to consider. Thank you very much. They made both the single-player and the multiplayer. When I did my video of the Homefront multiplayer, I came to the conclusion that it was alright. It was not exactly amazing, but it was pretty good. It was definitely a hell of a lot better than the single-player actually was. Seems I've turned to bacon. How curious. But this time around, they've decided to focus entirely on a multiplayer title, which is what they really should have done with Frontline's Field of War as well. If they'd just canned the single player entirely and gone for the multiplayer only, I think the game would have ended up being just a little bit better. That was not the ideal place to spawn at all. So that's exactly what they did, and they've gone for the post-apocalyptic theme this time around, which is great from an aesthetic standpoint because it means you can have all sorts of really weird and wonderful looking classes. If you head on over to the scavenger side, for instance, you'll see that you've got your very standard post-apocalyptic Mad Max gangster nomad kind of style going on, which is, it's an attractive style, to say the least. It's definitely something worth having a look at. It's interesting, far more interesting than your standard soldier-on-soldier combat. Maybe I can... Oh, well, apparently not. Looks like I got RPG to death. And what you've also got is a number of very much ragtag vehicles. A lot of cars with guns strapped to them, grenade launchers and things like that, as well as makeshift gyrocopters, and some pretty neat stuff. And you've also got these really nicely designed maps. This one, Liberty, for instance, has a collapsed Statue of Liberty in it, and all sorts of shantytown aesthetic going on, which I very much enjoy. Now, from a graphical standpoint, the game looks really, really good, but you don't really want to hear about that stuff. You can obviously see that it's not a bad-looking game. There are areas where it's a bit dodgy, like, you know, the textures on these fairly extreme angles and hills, for instance. That's quite a common problem with a lot of games. You don't generally have the smooth texture work there. It looks very blocky and jaggy. What is more important is, does the game actually feel good? Is the gunplay reasonable? Now, one of the first complaints I probably got about the gunplay is that it doesn't necessarily give you an awful lot of feedback. You saw that I got killed by an RPG. That was weird because I didn't see an explosion. So that's something that I think really needs to be resolved. If I get blown up with a rocket launcher, I expect to see the explosion and see me flying high into the air because, you know, it's an absolutely wonderful experience. It's fun. Even if you die that way, it's hilarious. So that's perhaps one of the most important things you can do when you're dealing with explosive weaponry. It's got to have a nice kinetic feel to it. This game doesn't really seem to do that all that well. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There are times when you blow up in a vehicle, you go flying, and the debris goes all over the place, and then there are times when an explosion happens, you just seem to disappear, which is not so ideal. Secondly, the gunplay. Is the straight-up gunplay any good? It's okay. It's not what I would call amazing. The guns have a reasonable kick to them, although they are not quite as meaty as I would hope. This, for instance, you know, I'm running around with it. It's either an M60 or an M249, and I would really expect the M249 to kick way more than this. In fact, the kick is actually very, very easy to compensate for. As you can see, I can empty an entire clip in vaguely the same direction, just with a very simple drag-down recoil compensation technique. It's not really all that difficult to use. I would hope that guns like this would just have a bit of meat to them. There are also some problems like getting stuck in the terrain, which seems to be fairly easy to do, unfortunately. Well, I guess this is one way of getting myself out of it. There we go. Some guns handle better than others. The sniper rifle doesn't really feel all that great. The main assault rifles like the AK-47 and the M4/M16, whatever the hell it happens to be, they're okay. They feel pretty reasonable, as does the MP5 and the Uzi on the other side. You know, this has a kind of a nice rapid-fire spray feel to it, which is good. But I feel they could definitely do an awful lot better when it comes to making their weapons feel meaty. One thing it doesn't slack on are the sound assets. Some really nice explosions in the background. The guns sound really awesome when you fire them, so that's definitely a plus. They just don't feel as meaty and as dangerous as I would actually hope. Perhaps there's something they can do about that. Later on, oh my, I don't know where it is. Also, the time to kill is very, very short indeed. It's, if you are outside of a vehicle, chances are you're going to get picked off by someone you didn't see at a reasonably long range. Bear in mind that this game also allows for prone gameplay as well, so it's really, really easy to be picked off like that. You've got to be very, very careful indeed. Game does support some squad play, so that will allow you at least to team up and try and spot for everyone on your team and hopefully not get horribly murdered. I don't even know where that fire is actually coming from there. I think maybe it just seems like the time to kill maybe could be extended just a little bit to give you a bit more time to locate where the hell the enemy is. On these absolutely massive maps, you have no idea what you're being shot by. Is it snipers? Is it a guy in a vehicle? Is it a guy that's prone on top of one of the many bluffs or hills around the area? I have no bloody idea. Difficult to say, very much so. What I will say, to the plus of it, is that the levels are pretty well designed. There's all sorts of little areas to hide and sneak around. There's depth to the levels. You can go pretty much anywhere as well. There aren't all that many invisible walls. It does a pretty solid job of hiding those quite nicely. I assume they're around here somewhere. Of course, there is the edge of the battlefield that you can't go outside of, but, you know, they do a pretty good job of hiding it, which I think is possibly the most important thing in a game like this. Vehicle play. Well, we haven't really seen an awful lot of that in this particular level. Once this level ends in about a minute's time, we'll probably get a chance to show you a little bit more vehicle play. There's a reasonable amount of vehicle diversity. I think there could perhaps be a little bit more. There's a bunch of trucks and technicals, as well as the APC. There's a little helicopter, and there are various armored cars, which happen to have weapons strapped to them in a very haphazard fashion, which I do like. For instance, a lot of them have heavy machine guns strapped to the side, where one of the guys just has to lean outside the window in order to fire it, which I love that. That's really, really cool. That's the kind of aesthetic and feel that I really want. And it's also complemented by the fact that everything in the game looks completely beat up and very, very well worn indeed. So, yeah, it's good for that. I didn't really want to see some really high-class, top-end military equipment because that doesn't really make any sense with the setting and the aesthetic. Vehicle play, it's pretty fun. It's fairly arcadey. You can have vehicles kind of skidding around the place in a rather haphazard fashion. The helicopters handle like the old Desert Combat ones. That's probably something I should mention if you don't already know. The Two Dawn Games guys were also responsible for Desert Combat, the old mod for Battlefield 1942, which is considered to be the spiritual predecessor to Battlefield 2. It put a lot of ideas in the game that were then adapted by DICE for Battlefield 2. So that's a fairly impressive resume, even if you didn't like Frontline's Fuel of War and you weren't so much of a fan of that game by the name of Homefront, the game that shall not be named indeed. This game is at its strongest when you've got some really nice vehicle combat going on. Hopefully I'll actually get to see that in the next mission. Hopefully I'll be able to show it to you. This is currently on a demo server, so we're kind of limited in the number of maps I can show you here. I think, well, we've got Liberty again here. We'll see if this one actually... it's just another thrust one. Maybe I can switch over to the scavengers. Maybe it'll actually allow me to do that. No, it won't, because the teams are currently even. That's unfortunate, because I'm not actually getting to really show you any vehicle gameplay here, which is the most important and easily the best part of Ravaged. In fact, it's actually uneven at the moment. That's unfortunate. Again, this is a demo server, which was one of the most populated. I do have the full game. In fact, I'll show you what the server list is looking like. This is not a pretty sight, honestly, and it's something that should definitely concern you. There are no active servers running except for this one. This is the only one with any players on it. Now, this game actually supports up to 64 players, but no one is playing it. I looked in the top 100 list. It's not even close at the moment, so that is concerning to me, greatly concerning. I think it's something that I really have to mention to you guys. I must, because if I don't mention that to you and I say, hey, go get this game because it's really, really great, blah, 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 and then no one's playing it, then you're going to get very, very upset with me. And I wouldn't blame you. You know, you get upset with me for a very, very good reason indeed. I think it's perhaps my duty to tell you that these servers are not all that populated at the moment. Unfortunately, it seems like there's been a couple of indie shooters coming into the scene over the last few weeks, and none of them are doing immensely well right now. Natural Selection is doing okay. I'm just going to try and rejoin this server, actually. I think that seems like a fairly good idea. Let's just quit to the main menu, and I'll rejoin that. I don't know why it is that these games aren't doing all that well. It could be a price point thing. This game is going for about 25 bucks, which could arguably be a little bit too much for some people. It is a multiplayer-only title. It has a reasonable number of maps, although not a huge amount, and 2 different game modes, which are definitely entertaining. Oh, nice. I've gone to the scavengers. Very, very cool indeed. Let's just grab this guy. Seems like a plan, and then we can start to push forward. Make sure to join a squad. Always a good idea. Don't really know why people don't do that. Actually not offering me a place to spawn at the moment. Hopefully I'll get that option momentarily. Let's see, like, where do you spawn? Apparently nowhere around here. That would be an interesting bug if it were a bug. Hopefully it's not. Now, the game does offer a demo. This is something that I did mention to you, and it's something that you should certainly consider trying, because it's available on Steam, and you can just play on this server. You can play on any of the demo servers, in fact. And it reminds me very much of the Wake Island demo from Battlefield 1942 days. That was the thing to play, and so many people enjoyed playing that. God, why will it... Oh, wow, is it that close? Okay, I guess we're going to be switching over pretty quickly. It's good to try that out, very much so. There's no reason not to try it out, really, is there? I mean, come on. It's free, you might as well have a look at it, and then maybe, just maybe, you'll think that it's worthwhile. The risk, of course, with that is that people will just stick with playing the demo and not actually buy the game. I'm very much hoping that people do consider it, because it seems to be fairly reasonable. However, when I say fairly reasonable, that's not exactly a ringing endorsement of a game, is it? This game feels quite average. Outside of the vehicle play, and that was an incredibly quick round for whatever reason, outside of the vehicle play, the gunplay in this game is basically par the course. It's run-of-the-mill, it's pretty average. So if you're going to enjoy the game, then spend a lot of time in vehicles and just tear around like a maniac in a buggy or a quad bike or a jeep or just anything you can get your hands on. The vehicle gameplay is the strength of it. When I'm on the ground, I don't feel like I'm having anywhere near as much fun, because it's just not as good when it comes to straight-up gunplay. Now, here we go. We've got a resource control one here. Now, thankfully, there's a lot more vehicle play in this, because getting across this map essentially requires you to be in a vehicle of some description, so you're going to see a lot of vehicles tearing around the place. Now, this is a map you should be familiar with if you watched any of the footage that I've done in the past. So we'll do a little bit of vehicle play, and then I'll try to come to a conclusion on Ravaged in its current state. I think perhaps this just hasn't really captured the imagination of many people yet. And that surprises me a bit, because people seem to claim that they really, really love post-apocalyptic games and vehicle gameplay and just being able to tear around in a vehicle, shooting stuff up, having crazy car chases. Which is what a lot of people did in the Battlefield games. They didn't really want to focus on the on-the-ground gameplay, the infantry warfare. Because why would you? Why would you want to do that if you can just tear around in a technical with a giant gun mounted to the sodding thing? Alright, let's rock and roll. I've grabbed the resource, or at least he has. Oh, we're stuck, aren't we? Okay, okay, that's fine. We'll get in there. Let's roll. As you can see, this gun's kind of attached to the side of that here. I can switch to the grenade launcher on the top of it. Let's just be a little bit careful with that. There we go. Okay, we got guy on a little quad bike over there, or trike. Let's just take him out. Nicely done. Now, this is the fun stuff. Now, driving around like a maniac, being able to kick nitrous in and doing all sorts of awesome stuff, that's where the game really, really shines. And of course, blowing yourself up and driving into other people and causing collisions, this is great fun. You know, that's really, really enjoyable. But there are some levels, I think it's the thrust levels, that really don't focus on that, and I think that they suffer greatly as a result of that. They're just not as entertaining as this is. I think maybe they just need to have another look at the gameplay modes and see if they can focus it even more on vehicle gameplay compared to what they currently have. Yeah, have some of that. You know, you see, that's an awesome moment. That's the kind of thing that I really want to see, and I was hoping to be able to rocket him, but he nailed me very, very quickly indeed. I suppose for some people this isn't really enough. Yeah, they look at this game and it's like, that looks like a bit of fun, but I don't really want to drop 25 bucks on it. And usually the argument's like, oh, well, I can just get TF2, or I can pay a little bit more and I can get Battlefield 3 when it's on sale, or Bad Company 2, which still has a reasonable kind of community behind it. Yeah, you could do that. I personally think the theme is a real strength. And I think that's perhaps the thing which will really get people super interested in it, because there aren't all that many post-apocalyptic vehicle-based FPS games on the market. Not a huge amount at any rate. So it's definitely worth a look in that regard. I don't really see a reason not to at least try the demo. It gives you 2 maps, it lets you play around with pretty much all the vehicles and screw around and see exactly what's going on with it. And I think if you get a bunch of friends in a squad and tear around and just have some great vehicle chases and awesome combat, then yeah, you're gonna have a lot of fun with it. And it does evoke the old desert combat vibe in many different ways, as well as Battlefield 2. I mean, a lot of these vehicles handle in a very similar fashion to some of the dune buggies and things that you could get in Battlefield 2, which I loved. I loved driving those things. Nobody wanted to be in one with me, because I'd usually drive them into a river, the sea, a skyscraper, a large explosive minefield, all of the above, really. But this is fun. I enjoy this an awful lot. So perhaps they haven't quite offered enough with the $25 package, and maybe it's worth waiting for it to go down in price, or see what kind of DLC updates they come with. They're promising all sorts of things. They mentioned that they were going to have this great big bulldozer battle fortress thing, and all sorts of other vehicles and weapons coming into play. The game also lacks a progression system, which for some people will definitely be a turn-off. You just play one of 5 different classes, and then you see how it turns out for you. Some people want progression. Personally, I couldn't care less. Yay, a game that doesn't have progression, and I don't have to play 20-30 hours to actually get the most out of it. I don't have time for that crap anymore. So I'm very, very glad indeed that we don't have any of that nonsense going on with Ravaged. But for some people, it would definitely be a turn-off. So, average gunplay, great setting, good sound assets, graphically reasonably impressive, and some very fun vehicle gameplay. Possibly not enough content to justify the price tag at the moment, but that's very much a subjective thing. One way or the other, you get to play a very, very generous demo. You can just go to the Steam page and download it. Search for Ravaged, click the download button, try out some of the demo servers and see what you think, because I think the game's got potential, especially with a little bit of future development. It does things quite nicely. Maybe they can ham up the guns just a little bit, make it just a little bit meatier and more enjoyable to just have this straight up infantry combat, because it does feel a little bit bullet hosey. They don't have as much kick as I would hope, and there's not perhaps as much skill involved as I would hope, but great level design and some really promising stuff here from the Two Dawn guys. I hope that they manage to tighten their game up, and I hope people at least try the demo, because even though the shooting is average, I think you're going to have some fun times with the vehicle gameplay. My name's been TotalBiscuit, taking a look at Ravaged. Once again, demo is available. Do try that out first. Bear in mind that the current in-game population is quite low, so have a look at the demo, see what you think before dropping any money on this particular title. The prices are on the screen right now. That's the price comparison, so you can have a look at that. And they have promised future DLC going forward. My name has been TotalBiscuit, taking a look at Ravaged. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.